Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for coming, and thank you also to the Step Back in Time shop for having me again. So let's jump right in. My latest book, Rosewood Manor, Harriford Grange at War, is the conclusion of the Harriford Grange Christian Historical Romance series, and it's set during World War II. So while I've been interested in World War II since we studied the Holocaust in 5th grade, I became aware of the story of Bletchley Park several years ago, and I was instantly fascinated by it. It's a remarkable story. So you might be asking, what is Bletchley Park? Well, if you don't know, it was Britain's top secret code-breaking center during World War II. And I'm not going to go into much detail before the reading because I could talk about Bletchley Park for hours. But if you have any questions at the end, I'll just be happy to try to answer them. So the park, which is now a museum, is located in was located in the small town of Bletchley near London, which has now been incorporated into a larger town called Milton Keynes. It was home to the Government Code and Cipher School, which was the GC&CS, was humorously known as the Golf, Cheese, and Chess Society. And with many now famous codebreakers, as well as Wrens, which were women in the Women's Royal Navy Service. And they operated early computers such as Colossus and the decoding machines such as the bomb, as well as military officers, soldiers, and countless staff. So here's an interesting fact. You can thank them for the smartphone in your purse or pocket because the code breakers and cryptographers on both sides of the pond were the ones who invented the first computers. I thought that was a cool fact. So I want to mention two remarkable points about Bletchley Park before I move on. One was that the Axis never found out about the work there. It was kept top secret. I even read about one couple who were married for decades before they found out that they had both been there at the same time. They never said a word about it until the news broke in the media. And then the second interesting fact is that the work there is estimated to have shortened the war by about 2 years. So we can thank them for saving countless lives. So my book contains 8 love stories, and they're from familiar families and new families. And I tried to capture as much of life on the British home front as was reasonable. And although I know there are inaccuracies and I'm taking a few liberties, I hope I've given a good idea of what life might have been like during this very tumultuous period in history. So I've decided to begin to do a reading of the beginning of the second story called Firestorm, because it features the grandson of my very first Harriford Grange hero, Dr. Colin Byrne, and the man's name is Drew McTavish, and he's a doctor, and the young woman is from London. Her name is Fern Holbrook. While this is not a story of code breaking, not all of them are, it's one of my favorites in the book. So I hope you'll enjoy this snapshot of wartime London, Fern and her little brother Ben's arrival in Harriford Grange, and the ending with her very useful, if not celebrated, contribution to the working of Rosewood Manor. But I'd like to begin by reading a short section of Winston Churchill's famous speech to the House of Commons. And it's from June 4th of 1940, and it's entitled, "We Shall Fight on the Beaches." I always get a little teared up when I read this. So, we shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. Okay, so story number 2, Firestorm with Drew and Fern. Friday, the 13th of December, 1940. "Let's hurry, Ben, so we don't miss the train," Fern Holbrook said, tugging on her 3-year-old brother's hand. London's St. Pancras station beamed like a beacon of hope, but with the mad rush to rescue children from the Blitz, the place was sure to be crowded. She hated rushing him like this. The poor lad was as starved as she, but their tickets, issued by the evacuation officials, were for the 8 a.m. train. It was already 7:45. She wasn't surprised when Ben didn't respond. He spoke little since their parents' deaths, but it was made worse with the nightly bombings. The past weeks spending the night in communal bomb shelters hadn't helped either. Evacuation personnel directed them to the correct line, and soon they were ensconced in a carriage headed north. Destination unknown. They would be called when it was time. Ben snuggled into her side and fell asleep. The steam engine was packed with passengers ranging from mothers with newborns to school-aged children traveling unaccompanied. Many young teenagers remained in London, taking what jobs they could find, and, Fern assumed, for the thrill of living through the Blitz. If it wasn't for the fact she was Ben's legal guardian and he was below school age, she, at 18, would not have evacuated either. "Free up a man for the front" was the slogan calling female workers into factory jobs to fill slots left by drafted men. Lulled by the rocking of the car, she too drifted off. She awakened at each stop, chilled through, and eager to hear their names called. But it wasn't until dinner time that they were summoned. Outside, an evacuation officer directed them to a quiet man in his late 20s. "This is Dr. McTavish, love," the plump woman said. "You and the little one are staying with him." Then she scuttled back to the train. Fern peered over the stranger's shoulder, but he was alone. His wife must be at home. "Hello, sir. My name is Fern Holbrook, and this is my little brother, Ben. He's 3. "It's nice to meet you, Fern." Ben. His rich baritone melted all the way to her toes. Her brother hid his face in her ratty camel coat, formerly her mother's. The lush mink collar had long been sold. She couldn't help but eye the doctor's chocolate brown wool fleece overcoat, used but well cared for. "I hope your trip was pleasant." "As much as could be expected," she replied, stroking Ben's soft brown hair. The doctor picked up their one bag, protesting when she tried to take it from him. "Let me be a gentleman. You must be starving. Addie is working late, but I'm sure we can find you something to eat." As his gait faltered, she noticed the brace on his leg. "Thank you, Dr. McTavish." "Dr. Drew, please. Dr. McTavish is my father." Outside the station, several boys, ranging from a little older than Ben to their mid-teens, clamored from their fire can to hawk newspapers, cigarettes, chewing gum, and magazines. Dr. Drew fended them off as Fern turned up her minkless collar. Ben gripped her hand as they followed their host to a stone cottage beside the Harriford Grange clinic. The doctor urged them in, latching the door against the feathery snow beginning to fall. Inside was warm and dry, but the small entryway filled Fern with misgivings. They knew nothing about their host family. What if Addie is a fabrication and we're now held captive by this man? "Snap out of it, Fern," she reprimanded. "You're not in London anymore." A few toys lay scattered about the front room where a low fire burned in the grate. Soft jazz played over the wireless, reminding her of their old home. Dr. Drew pointed down the hall. "You'll be using my nephew's bedroom. It's on the right." The room was stripped down to accommodate their things. There was one bed and a pallet laid on the floor. He set their bag down with a grimace. Guilt pinged her. She should have insisted upon carrying it. "This is very nice, sir. Thank you. My room is across the hall, and my sister is next door. The washroom is at the end." As he shifted his weight, the muscles in his jaw clenched as if he was in pain. "I'll have dinner for you in the kitchen after you're settled." "Please don't trouble yourself. I can—" "You're our guest. You'll do no such thing," he replied, then relented. "At least for tonight. Addie will explain how she wants things run better than I can." May I bathe my brother? Certainly. Please think of this as your home for now. After he left, Fern unpacked. In the washroom, she ran a shallow bath, stripped Ben, and gave him a good scrubbing. She longed to do the same to herself, but it would have to wait. After rubbing him dry and earning a few precious kisses, she pulled on his threadbare pajamas. An acrid odor filled the air in the hallway. And in the kitchen, Dr. Drew stood over a cream enamel Aga stove, muttering to himself. He motioned to the table. 3 glasses of milk sat with a basket of sliced brown bread. Fern seated Ben, and after he was happily sipping, she tiptoed to the doctor. May I help? She asked, eyeing 3 empty cans of tomato soup. He dropped the wooden spoon with defeat. I bet you won't burn this one. She moved the pot to the cooler burner and stirred the rich red soup as he leaned against the counter next to her. I can feed the Aga, but otherwise I'm hopeless in the kitchen. He must be if he can't even heat up canned soup. The blessed heat from the always-on stove warmed her less than Dr. Drew's perusal. He was handsome for sure, with a strong jaw, wavy reddish blonde hair, and a smattering of copper freckles. Yes, doctor? She asked when he kept staring. How old are you? That wasn't the question she was expecting, and her appetite failed. 18. As if she zapped him with lightning, he bolted to the table. I see that now. At the station you seemed younger, despite your height. Are you always this forward? She asked, showing her London boldness. Forgive me. He lowered into the chair across from her brother. Sometimes my professional habits leak into my private life. His aura of defeat dissolved her misgivings. Living in the slums, fending off men eager for a good time, she was more jaded than any young woman should be. Although she'd not lost her innocence in that way, thankfully, she'd seen some of her schoolmates succumb to the trade to put food on the table. No, she replied, serving the warm soup. You've been nothing but kind, sir. Thank you for the meal and for opening your home. It was my sister's idea, he admitted after saying the blessing. She took me in, too, when I was discharged. Oh, you were in the service? She tucked a napkin under her brother's chin. Army doctor. My unit came under fire, and I was hit by some shrapnel. Under his candor, anger and disappointment simmered. Spent 3 months in a military hospital. I'm sure your family was glad to have you back, Fern said, adjusting Ben's grip on his spoon. Too many men don't make it. The clock soon struck 7, leaving Fern to wonder where his sister worked. She caught herself before her imagination ran amok. After tucking Ben in for the night and taking a quick bath, she headed toward the sitting room. A woman and a young boy tumbled through the door. Oh, who are you? The doctor's near twin cried, shielding her son. Our guests, Addie. It's been a day. Let me get Geoffrey settled, and then we can meet properly. Fern moved out of their way, choosing the love seat opposite Dr. Drew's chair. He held a recent issue of the Times. It's not you. She's always scattered. That's a comfort. Fern pointed to the grainy image on the front. We used to live near there when our parents were alive. It's all in shambles now. I'm sorry to hear that, both about your home and your parents. We haven't lived there for ages, she replied. Steady jobs for those without childcare are hard to come by. Speaking of which, I must earn our keep. Is anyone hiring? We'll ask around. He hid behind the paper as the news report came over the wireless. London was preparing for another raid, and nearby Sheffield had been hit the previous night. Always bad news, Addie said, flopping next to Fern. Fluffing her wavy bob, she kicked off her pumps to reveal worn silk stockings. I couldn't find my loafers this morning. I think Geoffrey hid them somewhere, but the little scamp won't confess, not even for a lolly. When her brother didn't respond, Addie chucked a ball of wool from the basket at her feet. Fern recognized it as reused sweater yarn, socks for the soldiers. Did you speak, Addie? Drew asked, snapping his paper back into form. Fern's heart skipped a beat at the teasing twinkle he directed her way. She's always going on about something. His sister replied, rolling her eyes. She turned to Fern. Let me introduce myself. Addie Morris. I work part-time at the chemist, part-time in the post office, same place, different counter. My rowdy son is Jeffrey, and he's 4. Fern Holbrook. My brother Ben is 3, and he's been quiet since our parents died a year ago. I'm sorry to hear that. Addie's quiet observation reminded her of the doctor. Is everyone in Harriford Grange going to stare at me like I'm an oddity? My husband is stationed somewhere on the continent. We get a letter every now and then. I always wonder if it will be the last. Addie, Dr. Drew warned. Drew, I'm being practical. She faced Fern again. He says I'm pessimistic, but because we pray for something, it doesn't mean it's God's will. No, but we should trust him, her brother replied. You're one to talk. You've been moping about ever since you got back. Rising, she stretched her tired limbs. You do something with him, Fern. I'm out of ideas. Me? Addie, do you know of anyone hiring? Drew asked, his color deepening in the soft light. His sister paused by the door. Not offhand. I'll ask around tomorrow. What are your skills? Fern's mind went blank. She'd been doing odd jobs, nothing constant. Do I have any skills? I'm willing to do about anything, but if Ben can't come, he'll need someone. The aunts, Drew interjected. We have a mom and a bunch of aunts who adore children, Addie explained. I can't pay much. They won't take a cent. She flew off to bed, leaving Fern again alone with Drew. You're in Harriford Grange now, he said, soothing her fears for the future. We take care of each other. Drew bid Fern good night, but her image lingered long after parting. She was much too thin, and her hard shell was unlike the girls of Harriford Grange. What kinds of jobs has she done, or been forced to do, to feed herself and her brother? His eyelids drifted closed as he rested his head on the back of the chair. Bold amber eyes stared back, gaunt, yet sparkling with determination. He traveled over her face and down her frame before he stopped himself with a start. She's 18, 10 years younger than me. Even though he knew many happy couples with age gaps, his step-grandmother Anne was 15 years younger than her first husband Lucas. Thoughts of him and Fern felt improper. Add to that his injury. Young women wanted strapping specimens, not broken-down models. It was unlikely he would regain full use of his leg, despite the grueling therapy. He wouldn't saddle any woman with his burden. My interest in her is professional, to ensure she and her brother are healthy. It was unlikely they would stay in Harriford Grange. Addie left early with Jeffrey the next morning, both half asleep. Drew finished his breakfast and was sipping another cup of tea when Fern and Ben entered the kitchen. Has your sister already gone? She asked, hovering. The boy's wide blue eyes stared at Drew as if they'd never met. Yes, but she left breakfast on the stove. I hope you like porridge. The kettle's hot, too. He tried not to stare at Fern's thin shoulders by focusing on Ben. In many ways, the boy seemed shell-shocked, but Drew sensed a light burning below the surface. He'd always been good with kids. He could try to draw him out. Yoo-hoo! Drew, Fern! Drew laughed. In the kitchen, Aunt Nessa. Fern's gaze darted from him to her brother to the doorway. The retired schoolteacher appeared, sending the siblings a smile honed from years of comforting small children. Drew tipped his cup. Cuppa? No, thank you. I just left an emergency COGS meeting where I drank enough tea to drown an elephant, pardon the phrase. COGS? Fern asked. Committee for the Oversight of Growing and Saving, Nessa replied. It was the Committee for the Organization of Genteel Society, but with the war on, we decided to rebrand. Celia came up with the name. That's nothing to Walter's rendition. That's Celia's husband, he clarified. Celia's Order of Garden Spies. They sound like quite the pair, Fern said. She set 2 bowls on the table and slid into the seat next to Drew. Eat up, Ben. Miss Holbrook, this is my mother's sister, Nessa. I would hazard a guess. She's... Addie telephoned this morning to see if I was free to watch a little one. Now have no fear, Fern. I was a school teacher for more years than I can count. If you and Ben would give me the honor, I'm confident we'll soon be the best of friends. While Fern seemed to have her doubts, she nodded. Ben's focus was on scarfing up his breakfast, not showing any anxiety over the pending separation. He knew the boy could hear, but was he slow, or does Fern often leave him in the care of strangers? Ben, she said, waiting for his full attention, I need to inquire after a job this morning. Mrs. Gunn. Mrs. Gunn will be staying with you. She's a nice lady and will take good care of you. Will you be good for her? Ben nodded solemnly, peeking at Nessa. When she winked, he continued eating. Drew exchanged a glance with his aunt. Fern sat rigid, dipping her spoon away from her and taking dainty bites. We're making her uncomfortable, he realized. Rising, he beckoned to Nessa. Come, Aunt, how is Uncle Jake? They chatted in the front room until Fern and Ben were ready. When Fern kissed her brother goodbye, he clung to her for a long moment. Will he burst into tears? Instead, Ben was happily redirected to Geoffrey's toy soldiers. Fern waved to Drew before walking into the narrow entry. Wait, Miss Holbrook. Sir? Being that you're new here, I would like to accompany you. When she hesitated, he continued. We're a friendly community, but you're a stranger. I can vouch for you. You barely know me, she replied, shrinking, and I'm sure you have better things to do. I've seen enough to know you're a respectable young woman. He let the comment dangle in the air. It's what he wanted to believe, at any rate. Will she refute it? All her fight drained out. Thank you, sir, for your faith in me. Pleasure filled him until she noticed his brace. But are you sure? Yes. He regretted his harsh tone as soon as the word exited, but Fern barely flinched. He grabbed his cane, the one he forgot yesterday, and outside in the street offered her his arm. Call me old-fashioned. Thank you, Doctor, she replied after a moment's indecision. I haven't had many respectable gentlemen offering to escort me, so where to first? I see. He could imagine the offers she received. He hailed a cab, guiding her by the small of her back. His blood boiled, making his next words come out too harsh. Come with me. She stopped dead, spinning into his arms. I believe we've had a misunderstanding. I'm not that kind of girl. Housekeeping, Miss Holbrook. Vacuuming, linens, that kind of thing, he said, smiling penitently to put her at ease. Last time I was at Rosewood Manor, they were hoping to hire ladies from the village. Oh, she slipped into the cab first. Once inside, he gave her all the space he could. Is it a boarding school? Something like that. Dr. Drew. It's all above board. He risked an elbow nudge. You can trust me. She examined him like a cat before laying her hand on his forearm. I find I do trust you, sir. Thank you for that. Your references? Jess requested, her wren uniform elegant on her healthy frame. Fern liked the kind woman, but the Inquisition might be her downfall. None, ma'am, other than Dr. Drew. The places I've worked aren't the sort to provide references. Oh? Words mustered up like a defending army. They were lower-class families. I've cleaned, cooked, laundered, and even washed cars. I understand, Jess replied, but I can only hire those who I trust to be discreet. Please, ma'am, I need this job, Fern begged. I'm my brother's guardian. He's 3, and I'm all he has. The McTavishes are good people, but I refuse to rely on charity when I can work. One moment. She flipped through the papers on her ornate desk, leaving Fern time to take in her surroundings. Is this Miss Maxwell's home? The sentry box out front and the military staff made her think otherwise. I believe we can offer you something twice a week at the start, light housekeeping in the dormitories on Mondays and Thursdays, beginning today. Will that suit? Thank you, ma'am, Fern replied. The woman slid a paper and pen toward her. There's one condition. You must promise never to reveal anything you witness at this facility, not to anyone. Jess held the pen out. Fern scanned the document titled Official Secrets Act. Her jaw slack. As she scrawled her name, she felt as though she was signing her life away. Welcome to Rosewood Manor, Miss Holbrook. I'll show you to your station. Okay, so as usual, if you want to find out if they end up together and if Ben ever comes out of his shell, then you'll have to read the rest of the story. And if you want to read more about code breaking and Rosewood Manor and bits about Bletchley Park in World War II, also check out my book. So, does anyone have any questions?
What is the Axis?
The Axis was Germany, Italy, and Japan during World War II. They were the Axis. The Allies were United Kingdom, France, United States. I feel like there's another one. So, any other questions? Oh, okay. Yes, my outfit today is, the suit is a reproduction of a 1940s utility suit. These were created during this time because of the rationing of fabric. It's got small lapels and these little details here that require very little material and very little stitching. The skirt is a straight pencil skirt because that is the most efficient use of fabric. But one thing that was remarkable during this time that you see a lot today as well is that even though it's there's very little use of fabric and it's very streamlined, the detailing that they put into it to make it appealing to the consumer makes it much more elegant than just plain boxy things. So they made it this way because I read an article yesterday actually. They put so much effort into it because at first the ladies weren't sure that they wanted to wear utility clothing. So the designers put a lot of effort into small details like the collar, the flaps here, the little bit of puff right here, things like that, in order to make the silhouette look very nice and very stylish and still rationing the material. So this was created based on a British suit, or was created from an exact copy of a British suit. So this is what the ladies in my book would have worn. Any more questions?
Your book's a group of short stories. Do they all focus on the British home front, or do any kind of look at characters in other areas of the world?
For the most part, they focus on the British home front. However, I do have characters who, one of which was an American celebrity. He was an actor in California. He was originally from Tennessee. He's my Southern Cary Grant. So I have an American actor who that's authentic because there were actors and actresses who were sent to Bletchley Park because of their education and their training. They were actually very good at the work that was done there. Another thing I've included is scenes with soldiers in places such as Crete, the Battle of Crete. I have a soldier stationed there. And also El Alamein in Egypt. I have a soldier there. So you get little snippets from around different places around the world that I made as authentic as I could figure out how to do. So.
Where did you get your information?
Well, I've got several books that I read, also watched a lot of documentaries and a lot of online research. Two of the books that I got on code breaking were actually written by the nephew of Alan Turing, who is a very famous code breaker at Bletchley Park. His nephew has written two books one's about Bletchley Park and one is about code breaking, and they're very, very well written, very insightful books. And all of the books that I used are actually in the back. There's a section in the back that tell the books. So if you want to check out those books, that information's in the back. Anything else?
Do you talk to me about the food?
I do talk a little bit about the food. I realized the other day that I think the cans of soup were supposed to be referred to as tins of soup, but I use cans because I'm American. But I think I've usually heard them say tins. So tinned soup, but it's okay. I do talk about other foods. There's 3 recipes in the book that are all from World War II, and also on my Instagram and Facebook, I have posted some things about World War II and whatnot. I would like to post more recipes and things as well, if anyone's interested. One more thing I wanted to point out was the makeup of the time. I've tried to recreate that as well as I could. Red was a big color, and the reason that red, you see red nail polish and red lipstick so much with World War II is because Hitler hated red lipstick and so all the women in Britain and America said, well, if Hitler hates red lipstick, we're going to wear red lipstick. So that is why red lipstick is the quintessential color for World War II. And it also is a very flattering color on every skin tone. So, is there any more questions? That's it. Okay, thank you all so much for coming, and thank you to my daughter for being an absolute angel today too.